Ever feel like, you're stuck with a bad habit? Like you just can't shake it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you're driving, right? And you're on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And you take the same wrong exit
Yeah.
every single time.
Oh, tell me about it.
Even though you know there's a better way to go.
Right.
And we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So today we're diving into how to actually break those cycles. You rewrite that map for real this time.
And the key is, I think, understanding those autopilot routes in the first place.
Right.
Why does our brain seem so determined to stick to those well-worn paths, even when, they're really not serving us?
Oh, no.
That's where our deep dive source comes in. Breaking bad habits is easy, actually.
Ooh.
Simple steps to lasting change.
Which is, that's a promising title because, let's be honest, easy is exactly what we want when it comes to, changing our behavior. No more, superhuman willpower needed.
Oh, exactly.
It's like, what's the secret sauce? What's this book saying?
Well, the book starts, I think, really smart by reframing how we even understand habits in the first place.
Okay.
It's not about being flawed as a person.
Okay.
It's about our brain being incredibly efficient.
Interesting.
Think of your brain like a savvy GPS.
Okay.
It loves to find the most efficient route.
Right.
Even if it means getting stuck in the same traffic jam every day.
The worst.
Habits are those well-worn paths, in our neural networks.
Okay, so our brains are all about efficiency. Even if that efficiency leads to, a late-night date with a pint of ice cream instead of the gym.
Yeah.
So how do we convince our inner GPS to, reroute us?
By understanding the code it runs on.
Which is?
The cue routine reward loop.
Okay, I've heard of this.
It's like this. You encounter a trigger. That's your cue.
Mm-hmm.
You follow the same familiar path. That's your routine.
Right.
And then you reach a destination that gives your brain that little dopamine hit.
Okay.
That's the reward.
Makes sense.
And the more you travel that route, the more ingrained it becomes.
So it's like that classic example, right? You get home from work, you're feeling stressed.
Cue.
Cue.
Exactly.
Head straight for the cookie jar routine. And get that, temporary wave of comfort. Reward. Boom.
But if we're aware of the loop now, can't we just hit the brakes before we reach for the cookies?
Where does willpower even come into play?
Well, it's less about slamming on the brakes, I think, and more about, gently steering yourself in a new direction.
Okay.
Our source, Breaking Bad Habits, is easy, actually uses this phrase, skill power.
Skill power.
Instead of willpower.
I like the sound of that already.
Right.
So it's less about brute force and more about strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. Remember how we were saying our brains just love those reward pathways?
Yeah.
The book emphasizes, instead of trying to erase a habit entirely, which honestly can just feel like deprivation.
Right.
We should try to focus on replacing it with a new routine that offers, a similar but hopefully healthier reward.
So using our cookie example, instead of battling the urge for that sugary rush when we walk in the door after work, we need to find a new route to a different feel-good destination.
Precisely. And that's where this whole idea of positive addictions comes in.
Positive addictions.
Yeah, the source talks about how, we don't usually think of someone who, craves a morning run.
Right.
Or who just loves spending time gardening as being addicted.
Right.
Even though those activities are also triggering those reward circuits in the brain.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's about finding those things that, light up those same reward centers, but in a way that supports our well-being.
Yes.
Rather than working against it.
Exactly.
But let's be honest. Change can feel really daunting.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we're, swapping out a so-so habit for something that we know is, stellar.
Right.
So how do we make this whole process feel less overwhelming?
Yeah.
I think our source had some insights on that, too.
Right. Absolutely. It really emphasizes that we need to break down those big goals. I'm going to transform into a marathon runner overnight.
Right.
Into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
It's the micro habit approach.
Macro habit.
And it's all about making change feel, easy and achievable.
So instead of vowing to hit the gym for an hour every day.
Right.
Which, let's be honest, can feel like a recipe for just guilt and burnout.
Totally.
Maybe I start by just committing to a 10-minute walk 3 times a week.
Yes.
Is that kind of the idea?
Exactly. And the best part is, each time you complete that 10-minute walk, your brain gets that little hit of dopamine, which then reinforces the behavior.
Interesting.
And don't underestimate the power of celebrating those small wins.
Absolutely.
That sense of accomplishment fuels your motivation and makes it so much easier to stick with it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like giving yourself a high five every time you choose the stairs instead of the elevator.
There you go.
It's about recognizing and rewarding those small steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
But what about when we hit a bump in the road?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, even with the best intentions, we're not perfect.
Right.
Slip-ups are bound to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do we deal with those moments when we kind of fall back into those old patterns?
Yeah, and that's okay. The book actually encourages us to reframe those slip-ups as like valuable data points
Right.
rather than failures.
Yeah.
It's all about learning from those moments and kind of adjusting your approach accordingly.
So if I do K's and demolish that entire bag of chips in one sitting,
Right.
it's not a sign that I'm hopeless and should just give up altogether.
Not at all. It's just an opportunity to kind of hit pause and ask yourself, okay, what happened there? What was the cue? What could I do differently next time?
It's like having that growth mindset,
Yes.
but for habit change.
Precisely. Instead of beating yourself up, you're gathering information.
Right.
And then you refine your approach.
And this is where that whole support system concept comes in, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes we need a little help
Oh, for sure.
navigating those detours and staying on track.
Absolutely.
And I feel like our source had some really interesting things to say about that whole power of accountability.
Absolutely. The book really highlights that sharing your goals with someone you trust can make a world of difference.
It's like having a co-pilot, right?
Yeah.
For your self-improvement journey. It's someone to cheer you on and, offer a course correction if you kind of veer off track a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe share some of those been there, done that moments to remind you that you're not alone in this whole thing.
Exactly. And, our source reminds us that accountability doesn't have to be this rigid, formal thing.
Right.
Even just casually mentioning, your goal to someone.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm trying to drink more water these days. Just saying it out loud can increase your commitment.
It's like you're putting it out there in the universe.
Yes.
And suddenly you're more aware of your actions.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, wait, someone might actually ask me how that whole drinking more water thing is going.
Exactly.
But there's one more ingredient that our source highlighted that I absolutely loved.
Okay.
Which is making habit change fun. Because seriously, who said self-improvement had to feel like a chore?
Right. It should feel good.
Exactly.
Breaking bad habits is easy, actually. Dives into this idea of temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. What is that?
So you basically pair something you genuinely enjoy with a habit you're trying to cultivate.
Okay.
So it's like tricking your brain into looking forward to those healthy choices.
Okay, so I'll admit it, I'm way more likely to get on that treadmill if I only let myself listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I'm jogging.
There you go.
It's almost like the podcast becomes the reward for working out,
Yeah.
and suddenly exercise doesn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. Or maybe you only let yourself watch that show that you love
Yes.
while you're prepping healthy meals for the week.
Oh, that's good.
It's about finding what works for you and making those positive changes feel rewarding instead of restrictive.
This deep dive has been amazing.
It's a good way.
Instead of feeling overwhelmed by this idea of willpower and perfection,
Right.
we can approach habit change with a sense of curiosity,
Yes.
experimentation, and even a little bit of playfulness.
I love that.
So to recap, it's about understanding those habit loops,
Yes.
replacing rather than erasing,
Mm-hmm.
starting small, finding support, and making the whole process enjoyable.
And remembering change is a journey, not a destination.
Ooh, I like that.
It's about, progress, not perfection.
Right.
Each small step, each time you choose the stairs over the elevator,
Yes.
or swap that sugary drink for a glass of water,
It all adds up.
you are rewiring your brain and moving closer to those goals.
So as you go about your day, here's a final thought to ponder. If our brains are wired to seek out rewards, what's one small positive action you can take today to reward yourself for simply showing up and trying?
I love that.
That's it for this deep dive. Till next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep celebrating those small wins on the path to building healthier, happier habits.